Here we go, man. The meat and potatoes, Christmas Day. How y'all doing? Hit that like button. We got Riddle. How the U.S. nuked space and changed the world. This is an interesting topic, especially we got nukes in space. You know, terraform talk. You know what I'm saying? You gotta have a little common knowledge before watching my video. You can't be no dumbass nigga. See what they talking about.
1962, hotels in Honolulu, Hawaii were selling rooms like hotcakes. Everyone wanted to see the night sky, which was literally on fire. Northern lights are a rare sight in these latitudes. However, this time it wasn't the northern lights. It was nuclear. The U.S. military had just detonated a thermonuclear bomb in a place no one had dared to before, outer space. The explosion's impact was so stunning that news of this supposed top-secret test spread across the Pacific. But that was just the beginning. How did the US and the Soviet Union nearly turn the moon into a radioactive wasteland? Is it possible to reach other planets using the power of nuclear explosions? And which celestial bodies in our solar system could we obliterate with the force of the atom?
Look, you see how they just put Jupiter in your face right there? I feel like that'd be dangerous. Jupiter just gas. If you send a nuke to Jupiter, nigga, the whole shit, I could just imagine the whole
is your ultimate guide to nuclear
all the gas catching fire. It's just ugly.
Nuclear tests were conducted in the air, underground, and underwater. But why did American generals feel the need to blow up space? Right at the end of the 1950s, scientists thoroughly studied Earth's magnetic field, which protects us from solar radiation during solar storms. In theory, each storm could deliver a lethal dose of radiation to all living things on the planet. However, fast-moving charged particles get trapped along the magnetic field lines, appearing as northern lights. But these particles are also produced by a nuclear explosion. If you set one off high enough, Earth's magnetic field can create a nuclear glow, forming a kind of charged barrier. This can disable all the electronics in an intercontinental ballistic missile approaching from space. At the same time, since the particles travel along the magnetic field, you could detonate a bomb, say, in the Indian Ocean, and on the other end of the field line in the Soviet Union, all instruments within a wide radius would experience a massive electromagnetic pulse. It all sounded like the perfect plan for both defense and attack, so the U.S. military decided to test the theory in practice. On August 1st, 1958, during Operation Hardtack, a rocket was launched from Johnson Atoll, west of
this shit
Hawaii,
dangerous,
with
bro.
a
They need to leave these nukes alone, bro. The world's so beautiful. They out in Hawaii with the nukes. That shit don't even sound right.
Nuclear warhead yielding 3.8 megatons. It ascended to an altitude of 76 kilometers, which technically isn't considered space yet, but it's very close. The nuclear explosion, codenamed Teak, turned night into day for hundreds of kilometers around, and the glow was even spotted in Hawaii. The brightness lasted for only half an hour, but radio communication disruptions were felt across the entire Pacific for a full 6 hours.
So basically what they was testing was something to do with the magnetosphere and nukes and how you blow one up a certain distance above the ground, how you can get a reaction in another part of the world that's connected to the same. You feel me? Just for the dumbasses in the back, make sure y'all pay attention.
Was severely hampered, even in New Zealand. This was even though the magnetic field didn't catch most of the charged particles from Teak. The potential was obvious. Later that year, less than a month afterward, Operation Argus was carried out in the Atlantic Ocean, during which 3 missiles armed with nuclear warheads were detonated at heights of 170, 310 and 794 kilometers. That's already space. Each warhead was extremely low yield, just 1.7 kilotons, but even that was enough to create noticeable belts of charged particles. It was time for a much more powerful nuclear explosion in space. So, in the summer of 1962, the Pentagon launched Operation Fishbowl at the same Johnston Atoll. During the very first test, Bluegill Prime, the military lost control of the missile and had to destroy it at an unknown altitude. The nuclear warhead fell somewhere into the Pacific Ocean, and it still hasn't been found. But this failure didn't stop the Pentagon. On the evening
they just
of
waste
July
their money.
8th, the Starfish Prime test was conducted, during which a missile armed with a 1.4 megaton thermonuclear warhead detonated at an altitude of 400 kilometers. The explosion didn't create the usual mushroom cloud in the thin upper atmosphere. Instead, a sphere of scorching plasma formed, lighting up the sky for thousands of kilometers. But in Hawaii, that night, people saw more than just strange lights. The electromagnetic pulse from Starfish Prime knocked out 300 street lights in Honolulu, triggered home alarms, and damaged phone lines. A polar, or more accurately, nuclear aurora also appeared, attracting tourists for weeks. These effects far exceeded the military's
You know what's crazy about these nuke stuff, right? It's not like what's that shit called? Like a nuclear reactor waste. You know what I'm saying? Nuclear waste, like in Chernobyl. You can't go to Chernobyl for millions of years. But say they drop a nuke in your local area, it might be bad for, like, the radiation might be bad for a couple years. But pretty soon you will be able to come up. So if you got an underground bunker that's sustainable for a couple years, you should be good. And then you'll be able to come out and just live without having to worry about and have to live without worrying about radiation. That's how they still living in Nagasaki. They couldn't even measure
the full strength
Hiroshima.
of the electromagnetic impact because the equipment simply broke. But the most important thing was that this powerful radiation barrier, formed from charged particles trapped by the magnetic field, persisted for several months and disabled a total of 9 satellites, including one Soviet satellite. Technically, it was a nuclear attack by the U.S. on the USSR. In total, the energy from the Starfish Prime explosion had been dissipating over the Pacific Ocean for another 5 years. By 1963, the U.S. and the Soviet Union had signed a treaty banning all atmospheric and high-altitude nuclear tests. As Starfish Prime had shown,
that's the type of shit you do when you get scared and don't know what you're doing. You up there blowing shit up. No, what the fuck you doing? Oh shit, this shit serious. Let's hurry up and get
Each test could cause devastating damage across half a continent. Today, a similar space-based explosion over South America could disable most electronics in the central U.S., not to mention dozens or even hundreds of satellites.
I don't like this shit. I don't. Fucking with the atmosphere, fucking with the earth.
And that's without directly attacking the U.S. But even before Starfish Prime, both American and Soviet military forces had very real plans for far more ambitious nuclear detonations beyond Earth's atmosphere. At this NASA press conference in April of 1967, the esteemed Dr. Leonard Reifel spoke to the public about the key points on the moon's surface where future American astronauts should land. But that's not why NASA originally brought him on board. They invited him to find a location for something entirely different. rifle only dared to speak publicly about the top-secret Project A119 decades later. In the 2000s, details were accidentally revealed by one of his former students.
Welcome, please, Dr. Carl Sagan.
The legendary and now
Carl Sagan. This shit look like some conspiracy theory shit. Y'all know how they cracked the CIA files on that MK Ultra shit? Y'all think that shit real, or they just putting that shit out there for entertainment? I think some of that shit, the unclassified CIA documents,
Carl Sagan.
some of that shit
Back in
entertainment.
1958,
To be honest, I don't think that shit really official.
At the time, was secretly recruited along with other scientists by the newly established NASA. Their task was to assess the consequences of detonating a thermonuclear bomb on the moon. The mastermind behind the idea was the inventor of the terrifying device himself, Edward Teller, one of the key figures in the Manhattan Project. Teller proposed the test only for scientific purposes, but the American military saw it as an opportunity to get ahead in the space race with the USSR. On October 4th, 1957, the Soviet Union stunned the United States by launching the first artificial satellite into orbit. But U.S. intelligence reported something even more audacious.
Satellites,
a rumor
like
that by November, the Soviets were planning to detonate a nuclear bomb on the moon to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Bolshevik Revolution and humiliate the Americans once and for all. Though that didn't happen on schedule, the Pentagon was convinced the Soviets would eventually launch a nuclear missile at the moon. This sense of urgency led to the rapid initiation of Project A119. Based on the conclusions of the project participants, detonating a thermonuclear bomb on the moon's airless surface would create the same kind of deadly fireball as in Starfish Prime. However, even a relatively small explosion would send thousands of tons of dust and debris flying. Thanks to the moon's low gravity, much of that debris would escape into space, creating obstacles between Earth and the moon that could disrupt future missions indefinitely.
Motherfuckers don't be thinking about this type of shit. They just think, send a bomb. You got all different type of shit. You send a bomb, nigga, you can't go back up there. You know what I'm saying? Dumbass shit.
From Earth, the detonation would appear as a brief, faint flash, no brighter than a twinkling star in the sky. A subtle yet powerful display of
and all that for what?
Might.
All for what?
Rifle, Sagan, and others calculated that
fuck
delivering
science,
a sufficiently powerful thermonuclear device to create a noticeable flash was unfeasible. At the time, the Saturn V rocket designed for Apollo missions wasn't ready yet. But the military insisted they needed to blow something up on the moon and make it as impressive as possible. So the scientists proposed launching a missile carrying a modest 1.7 kiloton warhead, the same kind used during the Argus space tests. But the explosion had to happen along the terminator, that is, the visible edge.
No. The explosion had to happen while the United States could see it. They're not gonna send no missile up there to flex and not be able to look at it from the ground. I feel like all this shit just the they showboating. Look at my guns. Look at my guns. You feel me? Like, sit your ass down, bro. I'm trying to nuke some shit.
The moon.
Same nigga make the nuke can't fight in real life. You know what I'm saying? That's why he make these nukes and shit.
Disk and at some altitude above the surface to avoid kicking up too much dust.
You can't fight. Nigga got bullied. They got bullied in school, so he grew up making nukes and shit. You feel me?
Dangerous for future missions. That alone would
calm
have been
down.
enough for the Kremlin to spot the American test even in broad daylight. However, scientists warned that any radioactive dust from the blast that didn't escape into space would inevitably settle over vast areas
This looks like
of
a
the
Call
moon,
of Duty map.
contaminating
They need to
them
bring back
with
the jetpacks
radiation
and have niggas
for
on the moon and
centuries.
shit.
It would have been one
That's Nuketown on the moon, bruh. Look, Nuketown on the moon. It's raining. They got green water in the moon craters, nigga. You just Yeah.
Small nuclear blast for the moon, but one giant screw-up for all of humanity. But they didn't cancel Project A119 just because of that. More than just contaminating the moon, the Pentagon feared that a nuclear missile might explode during launch, embarrassing the United States. And for the very same reason, the Soviet Union scrapped their version of the plan too. I wish I could say that was the end of the insane lunar nuclear program. But there were even more fantastical and frighteningly real projects involving the use of atomic bombs in near-Earth space. Back in the late 1940s, when American engineers were just beginning to develop the first rocket engines, another Manhattan Project scientist, Stanislaw Ulam, proposed a radical idea. What if, instead of using multiple fuel stages, they used a whole bunch of nuclear explosions? That's how the top-secret Project Orion came to be. Tests with small models using conventional explosives proved the incredible potential of this propulsion method, assuming the armored shield at the back could withstand...
I think that's what they use now, nuclear-powered spaceships. I seen a video on that somewhere. The spaceship is powered off the same thing like a nuclear reactor, like the nuclear power plants. Nuclear energy is pretty efficient. So yeah, you could definitely power a spaceship with it. I'm not sure if that's what they do now or, you know, that's what they got going on, but I definitely heard of something like that in history before. Somebody proposed it, so.
And multiple detonations. The best part is that the bigger the spacecraft, the more power each explosion gives it. And General Atomics decided to take this concept to the extreme.
See, this would have been some cool ass shit to learn about in school, though. No cap, I can see my teacher putting this video on.
Here's a completely real project of a massive nuclear spacecraft, Orion, weighing 4,000 tons with a crew of 120. To avoid blowing the launch site to pieces, they'd send this giant into orbit using regular rocket boosters, a lot of boosters.
A lot of them bitches.
Once at a safe altitude, Orion would start dropping nuclear bombs one at a time. Each blast would push against the shield at the rear and, through shock absorbers, transfer energy to the entire structure. Drop enough bombs and you could accelerate to 1,000, maybe even 10,000 kilometers per second. That's over 3% of the speed of light. In fact, General Atomics envisioned Orion as an interplanetary vessel capable of reaching Mars quickly. But this wasn't about peaceful exploration. None of the people...
Now that's hard how they got that shit. So basically, if y'all wasn't paying attention, I'm gonna break it down for y'all like this. They got the spaceship, got nukes on it. They get that bitch up in the air, and after a certain point, nukes start dropping to propel it forward quicker. So the blast from the nukes is propelling this ship faster and faster and faster. Damn near 3% the speed. A nigga said 100,000 kilometers a second. Nigga, damn.
People on board were scientists. They were military personnel tasked with operating 520 megaton nuclear missiles. Just one Orion in orbit could pull off a Starfish Prime.
See, a nigga like me, I could have never came up with some shit like this, though. You gotta be a true motherfucking mastermind to sit there and come up with some wicked ass shit like this, bro. Like some diabolical, true evil genius. You was a weird ass nigga for even proposing this
10 times
in my book, but still, we need you. Keep your mouth shut.
More powerful than the original, or if the mood struck, wipe the entire Soviet Union off the map. This was not sci-fi. It was an actual project that could have been operational by the early 1960s, but safety concerns stopped it in its tracks. A warhead-laden Orion could just as easily detonate during launch, turning at least one American state into a radioactive wasteland. And even if everything worked perfectly, the crew would still observe absorb up to 700 rads of hard radiation from each blast, even through all the shielding. That's 10 times the dose where radiation sickness sets in. The plan was to solve this problem by developing cleaner nuclear bombs. However, when General Atomics asked President John Kennedy for help in 1962, he was so horrified by the idea of a nuclear space dreadnought that he ordered the project to...
Town Hall 17 in Clash of Clans is now available.
That's probably why they
on both
clipped
mobile
his
and PC with Google
to be shut down
probably why they
The weapons of war must be abolished before they abolish us.
Yet, one of the developments for Orion resurfaced much later. On March 23, 1983, President Ronald Reagan shocked the world by stating that American engineers were close to intercepting Soviet intercontinental nuclear missiles using space lasers. This sounded so fantastical that the media dubbed Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative Star Wars.
But this is the type of shit we do need, though. Say this, yeah.
Its core, the project was based on real technology developed by General Atomics as a weapon for a nuclear dreadnought, a still classified device known as the Kasaba howitzer. In this concept, the explosion of a thermonuclear bomb combined with a specific casing design would create not a sphere, but a focused plasma beam aimed in a desired direction. The same principle was applied by scientists from the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in the early 1980s. Their Project Excalibur promised Reagan that a single device could disable multiple Soviet warheads with its lasers, which led him to make his famous television announcement. The thermonuclear charge in Excalibur was surrounded by dozens of metal rods. Upon detonation, each rod becomes the foundation for a high-energy X-ray laser. Just one hit was enough to neutralize an active warhead from thousands of kilometers away. At least, that's what the initial lab tests indicated. However, after receiving generous funding from Reagan, the Excalibur team began overstating their results. It turned out that, despite the calculations, the X-ray lasers powered by nuclear energy were too weak and unreliable to pose a real threat to Soviet warheads.
God damn, man. God damn.
But rumors about the effectiveness of Reagan's Star Wars initiative
this was Star Wars shit for
pushing
sure.
them toward
but that's what we need, though. Something to disable them. So why did they ever, go back to the drawing board and do all that? Or did they just say, fuck it?
De-escalation.
Because not today, 2024, that could be something that we definitely,
Since Project Excalibur worked, even though it was never deployed. And even after the Cold War ended, nuclear bombs found other uses in space. I'm talking about nuking our solar system. There are currently at least 1 million asteroids flying around the solar system, and that's just what NASA's tracked over the past 50 years. Over 2,300 of these space rocks are considered potentially hazardous to Earth. An asteroid just a few hundred meters wide could destroy an entire city. An asteroid between 1 and 10 kilometers in size could wipe out nearly...
So from 0.6, not even a mile long, to 6 miles,
All life on Earth. But is this really a problem, considering we have a stockpile of nuclear missiles ready to launch into space at any moment? According to the latest scientific estimates, just 1 megaton of nuclear charge is enough to completely obliterate a typical city killer asteroid. However, the missile needs to be launched a couple of months before the impact, so that radioactive debris won't fall into the atmosphere, triggering a global catastrophe. But as it turns out, the required blast power grows exponentially with the size of the asteroid. Current NASA calculations suggest that taking out a 10-kilometer planet killer would demand a blast of 100 gigatons. But here's the catch. The combined power of all the nuclear weapons on Earth maxes out at only 4 gigatons.
Wait, what did you just say? Run that back, run that back, run that back. Run that back.
With the size of the asteroid. Current NASA calculations suggest that taking out a 10-kilometer planet killer...
A planet killer. So we don't even got enough nukes on the planet to save this bitch. If some dinosaur shit was to happen, we can't... It's nothing we could do.
Would demand a blast of 100 gigatons. But here's the catch. The combined power of all the nuclear weapons on Earth maxes out at only 4 gigatons. That's 25 times too weak. Still, we don't need to destroy the asteroid entirely. Just ensure it doesn't crash into Earth. In 2023, a team of scientists from the same Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory that once worked on Project Excalibur demonstrated that powerful X-ray radiation from a thermonuclear explosion can effectively deflect even large asteroids off course, but only those made primarily of silicate rocks and quartz with minimal metal content, even if we encountered just such a...
The reason why I stopped there is because, like, damn, if it's just rock, okay, but you got metal asteroids with metal in them, that's more dense. I'm just trying to imagine what that should feel like, man.
Killer
That's
would
a heavy
still have to
ass
overturn
rock.
the international ban on nuclear detonations in space and launch the mission years before any potential collision. The detonation would need to be carried out with pinpoint precision millions of kilometers away from Earth. And frankly, that's hard to believe. Let me remind you, during Starfish Prime, the U.S. military lost a thermonuclear missile in the atmosphere. But then again, nuclear detonations in space don't have to be perfect to benefit humanity. Here, you witness a very faint dawn over a strange red wasteland. It's as if someone dimmed the familiar sun by 50%. Suddenly, a bright flash blinds you from the north. Then a familiar mushroom cloud begins to take shape. But within less than half a minute, another explosion wipes it away. For hours, days, even weeks, you see nothing but nuclear blasts every 25 seconds. And instead of taking cover, you should celebrate, because these bombings aim to make Mars habitable within just a decade. Elon Musk's plan involves detonating countless thermonuclear warheads above the Martian polar caps to release greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane, warming the red planet relatively quickly. As a bonus, water vapor would also enter the atmosphere, thickening it. In theory, it sounds promising, but even rough scientific calculations show that for any noticeable effect, you'd need to drop 3,500 thermonuclear warheads on each pole daily for 7 weeks. That's many times more nukes than humanity currently possesses. But even if we manage to produce the necessary number of warheads...
No, you don't, bro. All you need is one nuke, nigga. One nuke. Strong enough.
Then detonate them exactly according to this plan, the new twice-dense Martian atmosphere would only reach 1.2% of Earth's atmospheric pressure, and it wouldn't warm up enough to make a difference. Meanwhile, the already high levels of surface radiation would skyrocket after detonating thousands of thermonuclear bombs. Instead of terraforming Mars, we'd turn it into a planet locked in a nuclear winter. But there is another idea: trying to heat it from the inside using nuclear bombs. If we could remelt Mars's solidified core, it could reactivate its magnetic field, providing natural protection against solar radiation like Earth has. But we'd need at least 8 trillion thermonuclear bombs for that. And hey, if we're already at it, why not throw in another 299 trillion nukes and completely obliterate Mars if it's of no use? Then we could move on to Jupiter. Even the largest planet in the solar system wouldn't withstand 100 billion trillion thermonuclear missiles. Or we could just make one enormous warhead the size of the moon itself. Blowing up the sun is a bit more complicated. It would take around 10,000 thermonuclear charges the size of the Earth, or 25 fully nuclear Jupiters. Compared to this power, the Death Star from Star Wars.
What the fuck is he talking about, bro? Like a nuking the sun with planets
would seem like a bubble gun. Bro? And before you say I've gone way overboard with all these space nukes, take a look at Cebulski's star, located 356 light years from Earth. It's only 1.5 times more massive than the Sun, and in theory, its composition shouldn't be too different. But besides hydrogen, helium, and trace amounts of oxygen, carbon, and iron, Cebulski's star contains rare and highly unstable radioactive elements, including uranium and plutonium. To this day, there's no sensible explanation for this anomaly, unless we assume that some alien civilization is constantly bombarding it with hyper-powerful thermonuclear missiles, leaving behind the remnants that we detect. So, what do you think? Will nuclear weapons come in handy in space?
Yeah, they
Not
definitely
for
will.
War, of course.
They definitely got their uses. But for like the shit that we actually need, terraforming Mars and shit, man, that shit way out of reach. Way out of reach. Make sure you hit that like button. Merry Christmas.